H Fleet Science Center. This is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Ruben H Fleet Science Center. How do you hear me?
We have you loud and clear.
All right, excellent. Good morning for us. I'm not sure what time it is up there, but glad to have you join us today. Let's jump right into it. We got some great questions from the kids here, and I want to make sure we get to them and not listen to me babble. So let's start right off with a question here we have from Cameron.
How long do you get to stay on the space station, and how long could you stay?
We get to stay for 5.5 months. And how long could you stay? For me, 5.5 months. However, I think there's other people who are going to stay longer. And it all depends, I think, more on your psychological aspect of this. Physically, I think you can stay here for a while. But after a while, you just want to come home.
All right, our next question here is from Eddie Watson.
What type of academic preparation do you need to become an astronaut? And do you have a master's degree?
Okay. Get as close as you can to the microphone, students.
Is there any way you could repeat the question a little closer to the microphone?
What type of academic preparation do you need to become an astronaut? Do you have a master's degree?
Yes.
I think it was what's the education to become an astronaut? I'd say yes, you need a master's. In many cases, like Steve Swanson has a PhD, I have a master's degree, so you at least need that. And then what field do you study? I would say pick a field of study that you really enjoy. I think that's kind of the key, is if you really enjoy and are passionate about what you're studying, then that's kind of what NASA wants. That's what they look for.
Please get as close to the microphone as you can when you ask your questions, students.
All right, next up we have a question for Steve from Tiara.
Is it always dark outside?
No, it is not always dark outside. We go around the Earth every 90 minutes, and that gives us 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every day. So it's wonderful for us. We get to have a beautiful time up here looking out the window. It's gorgeous.
All right, thank you. Next up we have Ashley.
How far away from Earth and how much further away?
Could you repeat the question, please, Steve?
How far away from the Earth are you, and how close are you to the moon?
So it's a great question because it seems like we would be so much closer to the moon than to the Earth when we're up here. But in reality, we're going around the Earth just barely, only about 250 miles off the surface of the Earth. So we're really, really close. And if I was to show you the moon, it would be about 40 feet away from us. So it would be outside of the space station in this little model. So from up here, the moon still looks very small, and we are extremely far away from it.
All right, kind of a surprising answer. That's kind of look at the scale of where they are. Next up, we have Micah.
What is your favorite type of food to eat in space?
My favorite type of food? Now, that's a good question. I think it changes a little bit as the time goes on when you're up here, but right now I'm going with the seafood gumbo. And I happen to have one right here. So this is what our food comes in, little packages, and we heat it up. We put it in a little heater, and we just open it up, and then you use a spoon and eat it just like you would at home, except we get to play with our food, and that's the fun part of eating up here.
Steve, if you could repeat every question, it would be helpful. We can't hear the students too well.
All right, so next up we have Francisco.
How competitive is it to become an astronaut? Did you have to take an astronaut entrance exam?
How competitive is it to become an astronaut? What kind of exam did you take?
So to become an astronaut, yes, it's extremely competitive. In the last group, we just selected 8 people in 2013, and there was almost 7,000 people applied, and we only picked 8. And so what sort of exams do you have to go through? It's a pretty rigorous 2-week interview process, and I would say the thing that you're most nervous for is the medical tests and also the interview with a panel of about 10 astronauts, and that always gets the nerves and the blood pressure going.
All right, next up we have Maya.
Is the food good? Do you get hot coffee?
How's the food?
Yes, do we get hot coffee and how's the food, I think was the question. So this is, again, what our drinks come in. And also this is a coffee drink right here. We can just add water to it, shake it up a little bit, and we have our coffee. Now, it might not be a Starbucks coffee, but it's pretty good.
And Steve doesn't drink coffee, so I'm going to steal this from him right now and put it in my pocket.
No, and the food is good too. It's not like eating at home, but it's still good.
All right, next up the question is from Jorge.
Is there gravity in space? If so, why don't you feel it?
That's a great question, and one that I didn't really understand for quite a while. And Steve will demonstrate here that we don't really feel the effect of gravity. But yes, right now, the Earth is pulling us almost as hard as it's pulling you. But the difference is we're just falling around the Earth. So if you imagine taking a baseball and throwing it so unbelievably hard that it would just always be going around the Earth, and then that baseball would be in orbit with us. And that's really the only thing that the rocket did when it launched us, is it just threw us so fast that we're always falling around Earth but never hitting it. So it looks like we have no gravity, and we don't feel gravity, but we're still getting pulled by Earth just like you are.
All right, thank you. Next up we have Anthony.
What has been your most breathtaking moment while in space?
My most breathtaking moment while in space. That's a tough one. There's lots of them up here. But for me, I think it was on my first mission, doing my first spacewalk. And it was dark when I went out the hatch. And so it was kind of all normal, it felt like. I was just training. That's exactly like in the big pool we use for training. And then I climbed up to the top of the station, which the way it was built then, we had a top about 50 feet above the station. And that's when the sun came out. And I got to see the Earth below, the station below me. And it was so beautiful and scary at the same time.
All right, thank you. And this one up is for Ruth.
Do you have to speak other languages on the International Space Station to understand each other?
Do you have to speak other languages at the International Space Station to be able to understand one another?
Well, primarily we speak English. However, we do have 1 German crewmate and 3 Russian crewmates. And so when we all gather around the dinner table, sometimes the language will just switch from English to Russian and back to English. And occasionally there's a little bit of German thrown in, but primarily English and Russian.
You guys following the World Cup up there?
We have definitely been following the World Cup. We actually get a satellite feed, and we've been watching all of the games, and it's quite a blast. Tomorrow's the big one, though, for this crew.
All right, next up we have Alexander.
How does time work on the space station?
How does time work? That's another good question. Yes, so we go off of GMT time, which is Greenwich Mean Time, or the same time that London is on. And besides that, though, we have a normal day. Even though we have the 16 sunrises and sunsets every day, we still go off a normal day. We wake up about 6:30. We start work about 7:30, and we work till about 7 o'clock at night. And then we take a little break and watch a TV or whatever you want to do in the evening, read a book, and then we go to bed about 10 o'clock and wake up and do it again the next day. So that's a normal standard day, but we just live off of the London time.
All right, here's a question from Elias.
How did it feel to launch into space?
How did it feel to launch into space?
Actually, that's a great question. And really, there weren't a lot of nerves. It actually felt great. the rocket, we ride up on a Russian Soyuz rocket, and the ride's actually really smooth. But I do remember about 10 seconds after liftoff, I'm a pilot by my profession, and about 10 seconds after liftoff, the wind noise over the outside of the rocket was so intense, I couldn't believe it, and it dawned on me that we were already greater than the speed of sound. And 8 minutes after liftoff, we were already going about 17,000 miles an hour. So when you piece that all together in your brain, it's completely overwhelming, the amount of energy and speed that you build so quickly in about 8.5 minutes on a rocket launch.
All right, next up we have Crystal.
How do you train your body to go to space? Do you need to eat certain foods or do special exercises?
Yeah, well, for being up here, you don't really have to be anything really special, but it really helps to have your body in shape and to be strong and your muscles strong, and your bones also strong while you're up here. So that's really important because when you're up here, you lose some muscle and you lose some bone density, and so it's good to help start off with a really good, strong body at that point.
All right, now we have a question from Elizabeth.
Is there Wi-Fi on the space station?
We absolutely have Wi-Fi on the space station, but what our Wi-Fi is not connected to is the internet. So all of our computers talk to each other, but the only internet connectivity we have up here is email. So we can email our family and our friends back on Earth, but we really have a lot of trouble getting on the internet, which is quite a change when you're so used to having your smartphone down on the ground. It takes a little while to get used to it, but we're getting along just fine.
Have a lot of catch up on your Facebook page when you get back, right? All right, so next up we have Kathy.
Have you ever been outside the space station?
You ever been outside the space station?
Yes, I have. I've been on 5 spacewalks, so that was 5 times going outside the space station, and that is a great experience to do. Again, it has many different emotions go through you when you do a spacewalk. One, of course, you have to get the job done, so there's a little pressure on you to get the job done. But 2, the view is so beautiful, and the whole idea of being outside and just seeing everything for yourself inside that suit is just fantastic. But then again, at the same time, you're outside in the vacuum of space in a little suit, and that adds a little nerves to you.
All right, next up we have Bernice.
What are the different types of jobs you have on the space station?
Well, we do have to take just about any role you could imagine. So really, we act as doctors. We act as repairmen. We acted as plumbers earlier today working on our toilet. We act as scientists. So basically, any job that you could ever imagine, we have to do. This is not only is this our laboratory, this is also our home. This is our gymnasium. So this is really it, and we have to take care of it. We have to work on it, and we have to keep it running in tip-top shape.
All right, we have a question from Davis.
How does being weightless affect the body?
How does being weightless affect the body?
Well, yes, how does it affect the body? Well, the first thing, being weightless is really fun. So we will definitely do almost anything to get up here. But it does affect the body. One, of course, as you notice, we don't walk around, so our muscles, especially in our legs, become weaker. The bones become weaker and smaller. And also, it affects your immune system. It isn't as strong either, so we could get sick more easily up here. So you have to take precautions for that. It also makes changes in your eyesight. So we're learning, and we keep learning new things about how it affects your bodies as we keep flying in space up here. That's why we do all the science on ourselves at the same time. But we try to have precautions or methods to help out and mitigate these issues, and so we come home in good shape.
All right, thank you. Now we have Evelyn.
Where do you sleep?
Where do you sleep?
Well, if you've ever gone camping and slept in a sleeping bag, we all sleep actually in sleeping bags, and we have little tiny bedrooms that are about the size of a telephone booth. They're extremely small, but because we're weightless, it actually feels like they're a bit bigger. The crazy thing is, right behind us in the camera, one of us sleeps on the ceiling, two of us sleep on the walls, and one of us sleeps on the floor. And we just have our sleeping bags tied off to the wall so we don't float out of our bedrooms. And actually, it works out really well. It's actually pretty comfortable and fun to sleep in there.
5 minutes, 2 more questions.
All right, we have Sam.
Does somebody have to drive the space station?
Yeah, Mission Control is in charge of driving the space station. So they kind of set it up. And today we actually had our reboost, which is kind of like driving. Once in a while, we have to put the station a little bit higher because there's just a tiny bit of drag out here, and it lowers our orbit just a little bit every day. And so every few months, we go ahead and raise it back up. And we did that today. And that was all done from Mission Control. So they're the ones in charge of driving the space station.
Although we like to pretend.
All right. And now a question from Joshari.
What experience are you working on?
What experiments are you working on?
I think the question was what experiments we're working on right now, and I don't know how well the video shows, but right now I have a sensor on my forehead, which is not the most glamorous experiment, but they're measuring my body temperature over a 2.5-day period just to see what space does to your sleep cycles, and there's very interesting data there. And just yesterday, a couple of us were working on Massachusetts Institute of Technology experiment involving these tiny satellites, and we have several of them, and they all communicate with each other, and they'll fly around and do different formations, and someday, hopefully, these little things will go outside and start working on our space station without us needing to do anything, which would really be neat. And so that's a super fun experiment. We've been burning things. We've been doing plenty of experiments on our bodies. And Steve just got done growing some lettuce, and our Russians were growing onions. So it's an extremely lively environment up here right now. Lots going on.
Well, thank you very much. I know you've got limited time. You've got lots to do up there, but let me ask you one last question. What's the most surprising thing you guys have encountered since you went up there?
That's a good question. The most surprising thing since we've encountered since we've been up here. Do you have a good question?
So really, this may seem like an odd answer. I've been up here for about a month. Steve's been up here for about 3.5 months. I think the most surprising thing for me, once you get over being weightless and looking outside and the beauty of the earth, it's just how quickly the human body adapts to living up here. So just after about 2 weeks, I was already used to almost every sensation up here. And so at first it was just crazy and I didn't understand. My brain didn't work and my stomach didn't work. But now it just feels like a regular old everyday life and I'm right back into my normal habits. So really the human body is the biggest surprise for me. It's an amazing piece of machinery and it's incredibly adaptive.
I get sound.
Station, this is Houston ACR. Thank you. That concludes our event.
Thank you, Reuben H. Fleet Science Center and students. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.